Okay, I want to talk. I'm on a bit of a roll because the volume seems to be okay at the moment, so I want to take advantage of that. And there are a lot of things I want to talk about um, that I think are topic worthy. So, in this video, I want to talk about press accountability and the powers of the press. Um, I feel that having a free press is absolutely essential for democracy. And what do we mean by free press? We mean press that is not controlled by the government, right? In a country like China, China is probably the most prominent example, but there are other examples. There is zero press freedom because in China, journalists basically have to ask questions that are pre-approved by the party. The idea that asking anything that's controversial or scrutinizing is unthinkable because they would swiftly find themselves in very hot water. It just wouldn't be thinkable. Um, so actually, the Chinese Politburo might be powerful, but in that sense, they're very weak. They're very thin-skinned, sensitive people. They can't handle criticism. Xi Jinping is weak in that sense. Um, it's a sign of weakness of thin-skinned people. So that sort of situation is ghastly because you basically have an authoritarian regime promoting all their propaganda and no one can question it. I think that is ghastly. That is why freedom of the press is so essential. Freedom of the press holds a powerful to account. Freedom of the press creates a situation where people can debate important issues, so it is vital to democracy. But that having been said, I also think we need to be very wary of the power of press tycoons. I mentioned earlier about in the video I made about the Coffington Catholic High School boys. There is also enormous distortion by powerful media organizations. In the UK, I believe the print press, which has a very long and established history, a very important a very important role in British history, and they've served a very positive role in many ways. But I would say they've also served a negative role. There is massive distortion. There is the behaviour of the red top press is nothing short of disgraceful. The way they have handled sensitive stories, or rather, let me put that another way because I don't believe in political correctness. The way they have smeared people and got into the business of character assassination and rarely apologise for it is disgraceful. Tabloids have literally ruined lives, sometimes innocent lives. So I have zero respect for tabloid journalism. I think it's sleazy. I think it's bullying. I think it is hypocritical. But that point about hypocrisy brings me to the issue I want to talk about here: doorstepping. So, if you don't know, doorstepping is a controversial practice whereby journalists go to the homes of prominent people, usually politicians, but that can also include business people and others, and basically badger them. Well, actually, I say prominent people, it also includes private individuals. And it's basically journalists badgering them with questions on their own doorstep, hence doorstepping. Now, most politicians don't complain about this because they're well aware that then the journalists will cry about press freedom. I personally think it should be outlawed because I see it as no better than harassment. I think there is a fundamental right, a human right, that everyone should have to privacy. And journalists have no respect for this. They will say they've got journalistic integrity, but I I think most journalists will defend the practice of doorstepping, and I think that's disgraceful. What I would love to see is every national newspaper editor have a large camp of journalists outside their own personal home and have those journalists ask them a barrage of personal questions about their private lives, about their marriage, about their children, and basically badger them. And then we'll see if they're okay with the practice of doorstepping. I find it astonishing that this is seen as okay. Now, defenders will say, oh, but it's holding the powerful to account. Well, what's wrong with going to their constituency office? What's wrong with going to parliament? There are other ways to put politicians on the spot, as they should be. But I fundamentally have a big problem with harassing people on their own doorstep. So, an example of this, the Labour MP Kate Ossamore, her son was arrested on drug offences, and That was controversial because he was a senior member of her constituency campaigning team, and she subsequently had to retire her position. But apparently, a Times journalist went to her house, and she got very angry and she threw water over the guy. But maybe it wasn't the best response. But the Times is framing that as, making him out to be the victim. As far as I'm concerned, if you go to someone else's private space, if you go to their house, then if you're behaving in an intrusive manner, you can't expect the person to remain calm. Now, maybe as a politician, she should know better. I don't know, but I really dislike doorstepping, and I think it needs to be outlawed because it's harassment. I mean, if that's just paparazzi tactics, and this is not just tabloid newspapers, this is so-called quality newspapers like the Times. I think it should be outlawed. The BBC has done it, and they target left and right. This has nothing to do with ideological bias. I mean, I'm not a Corbynite, and I remember when they were badgering Corbyn outside his own house. I think it's wrong, period. And like I say, these newspaper editors in general are hypocrites because they would never ever, be okay with a situation where they were put under the spotlight. I remember Piers Morgan was once asked about some personal questions, and he told the guy, I forget the format, it was some sort of debate situation. He said, "It's none of your business." Well, that's pretty rich coming from a tabloid editor like Piers Morgan. I mean, these people can give, but they can't take. And that is something that is pretty much universal about newspaper editors. They're very arrogant people. I think it's a general trait with newspaper editors. I mean, look at Paul Dacre. He edited the Daily Mail for a generation. He played judge, jury, and executioner. He smeared people on his front covers. I remember when he went to war with a young woman, only 16 years old. Why? Because she was speaking out against the fact that the Department of Work and Pensions was forcing her to go for a workfare program. As far as I'm concerned, she was standing up for herself. Paul Dacre, the despicable, snivelling card that he is, was launching these headlines, attacking her on a very personal way, and yet he was nowhere to be seen. He never ever subjected himself to public scrutiny. So, yes, we need to support press freedom, but if the phone hacking scandal, and the reason I mention that is people say, oh, it was 8 years ago, 7 years ago, but it's still relevant. The fundamental culture of tabloid journalism has not changed. Journalism has not changed. They're still as arrogant as ever. Um, and I would like those national editors. I often picture myself, if I'm ever on Question Time and something like this was raised, I would say, okay, what's your home address? Let's go to your house and ask you personal questions. If journalists insist that they have the right to do it, it's their job to do that, then they need to be prepared for scrutiny on themselves. They will say, oh, but we're not the story. I would argue if you are a national newspaper editor, you have power. So who holds you to account? I think Britain's a bit better than the States because at least we have Ofcom. There are mechanisms to complain. In America, those big networks like CNN, there is no accountability, none. And I think it's a very serious problem. So, where countries like China, there is no press freedom, and that's a very serious problem, I actually would argue that in Britain and America, the press has too much power in some ways. Now, Britain, we have libel laws. There's other areas where you could argue the press is restrained, but I think major media figures are incredibly arrogant people. They seem to think that they can play judge, jury, and executioner for everyone else, but as soon as the spotlight turns on them, they cry about press freedom. I have a big problem with that. I think it's incredibly hypocritical. So if you're a journalist and you think doorstepping is okay, I put a simple proposition to you. Would you be okay with a total stranger coming to your house and asking you personal questions? As far as I'm concerned, a politician's marriage infidelities has nothing to do with me as a voter, unless it's directly affecting their work. I can understand maybe if they are, for example, pontificating about Christian values and they're an adulterer, because that would be hypocritical. But otherwise, I really think it is no one else's business. I don't think there's any public interest there. And I think when sleazy tabloids claim that there is, they're just showing their utter lack of, that they just want sensationalism. and it's something I despise about the tabloids. But like I say, the Times, the Telegraph, the Guardian, they will all claim they have a right to doorstep. I think doorstepping is wrong. The BBC as well. I think that doorstepping is wrong. I think it's harassment. I think everyone has a fundamental right to a degree of privacy. If someone's accused of a serious crime, of course they should face tough questions. But I don't think it should be at their own home because, among other reasons, their family is there and their family doesn't deserve to be subjected to that. So, doorstepping should be outlawed.